Captain Hyun stood on the bridge of the Evening Star and watched the stars drift past the viewport. He had been a ship captain for 20 years, and in all that time he had never fired a weapon in anger. His father had been a captain too, and his grandfather before that. None of them had ever fought in a real battle. That was just how things were for humans now. 3,000 years of peace. That was what the history books called it. The long silence. No wars between human colonies. No fighting over resources or territory. No battles at all. Humanity had spread across 200 star systems, and somehow they had all learned to get along. "Captain, we're approaching Forum Prime," said Gina from her station. She was young, fresh from the academy with bright eyes and quick fingers on the control panel. "Ambassador Yuna is ready for her address to the council." Hyun nodded. "Good. Let's make sure everything runs smoothly." Forum Prime was the neutral station where all the galaxy's species came to talk. Humans had been part of this galactic community for 800 years now. The other species called them the Quiet Ones because humans always preferred talking over fighting. They were known for being calm, reasonable, and a bit boring. Ambassador Yuna walked onto the bridge. She was tall and elegant, wearing the formal robes of Earth's diplomatic corps. She had negotiated treaties with 17 different alien species and had never failed to find a peaceful solution. "How are we looking, Captain?" she asked. "Perfect conditions, Ambassador. You'll have a smooth delivery," Yuna smiled. "Excellent. Today's address is about cultural preservation. I'm hoping to get support for our museum program." Dr. Minho looked up from his research station. He was the ship's xenoanthropologist, always studying alien cultures and writing papers about them. "Ambassador, I've been reviewing the other species' recent activities. The Rothani and Pelax are having another border dispute. The Kelvex are arguing with the Thornid about mining rights. It's the same pattern every cycle. They'll work it out," Yuna said calmly. "They always do." "I just find it strange," Minho continued. "We've been at peace for 3 millennia, but most other species can't go 3 decades without some kind of conflict. What makes us different?" Hyun had wondered about that too. Maybe humans had just evolved past the need for violence. Maybe they had finally grown up as a species. Gina spoke up again. "Captain, I was thinking about something. I've never actually seen a weapon fired in combat. Not in real life. Only in historical simulations at the Academy. Do you think that's weird?" "Not weird," Hyun said. "Lucky. My grandfather's grandfather was the last person in our family to serve in actual combat. That was during the tail end of the Unification Wars. He always said we should be grateful for the peace we have now." The Unification Wars had ended in 3047 CE. That was when the last human factions finally agreed to stop fighting each other. Since then, nothing. 3,000 years of absolutely nothing. The Evening Star docked at Forum Prime without incident. Yuna prepared for her speech while the crew performed routine maintenance. It was supposed to be just another ordinary diplomatic mission. Then the emergency broadcast came through. Every screen on every ship and every station suddenly displayed the same message. A massive alien fleet had entered Council space. The Velcrin Empire, they called themselves. They came from beyond the galactic rim, from a place no one had explored yet. Hyun pulled up the scanner data and felt his stomach drop. 10,000 ships. The Velcrin fleet had 10,000 warships, and they were moving into Council territory like they owned it. "Get Ambassador Yuna back here now," Hyun ordered. The message from the Velcrin was simple and direct. They gave all species in the galaxy 30 standard days to submit to Velcrin rule. Any species that refused would face extinction protocols. They didn't explain what that meant. They didn't need to. Gina's face went pale. "Captain, that's a declaration of war against everyone." "Get me a line to Earth Command," Hyun said. All across Forum Prime, alien species were panicking. The Rothani were calling their fleets home. The Pelax were evacuating their border colonies. The Kelvex were trying to organize a defense coalition, but no one was listening. Every species was too busy trying to protect themselves. Ambassador Yuna returned to the Evening Star with Dr. Minho. She looked shaken but calm. "Captain, I need to send a message to Earth immediately." "Channel is open, Ambassador." Yuna composed herself and spoke clearly. "This is Ambassador Yuna to the Terran Assembly. We have received the Velcrin ultimatum, requesting immediate guidance on diplomatic response protocols." The reply came back within minutes. It was short and strange. Message received. Evaluating response. Stand by, that was it. No panic, no emergency meetings. Just stand by. The Galactic Council held an emergency session within hours. Every species representative was there, all talking over each other, all demanding action. The Rathani Admiral announced they could provide 4,000 warships. The Pelex Collective offered 6,000. Other species added their numbers, smaller contributions of hundreds or dozens of vessels. When they added up all the numbers, the combined Council fleet came to about 31,000 ships. It sounded impressive until someone mentioned that intelligence reports suggested the Velkrin actually had closer to 50,000 ships total. With more coming from their home territory, the Council chamber fell silent. Then they turned to Ambassador Yuna. What will humanity contribute to the defense fleet? Yuna stood calmly. We are currently reviewing our historical archives and consulting with our preservation committees. We will respond to the Council shortly. The other ambassadors erupted in anger. How could humans be so casual? Didn't they understand what was at stake? The entire galaxy faced extinction, and humanity was reviewing archives. The Rathani ambassador slammed his appendage on the table. The quiet ones will finally have to fight in their consulting committees. We don't have time for human bureaucracy. But Yuna didn't seem bothered by the outburst. She simply gathered her materials and left the chamber with Dr. Minho following behind. Back on the Evening Star, Gina looked worried. Captain, what are we going to do? Earth isn't taking this seriously. Hyun stared at the tactical display showing the Velkrin fleet positions. I don't know. I've never been in a situation like this. No one alive has. That night, Hyun couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his grandfather's grandfather, the old veteran who had fought in real battles. What would he say about this? What would any of humanity's old warriors think about their descendants facing a war after 3,000 years of peace? The answer came the next morning. Earth sent its official response to both the Velkrin Empire and the Galactic Council. Hyun read it 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. Request denied. Please vacate Council space within 48 hours. This is your only warning. Gina nearly fell out of her chair. They said what? Dr. Minho looked stunned. That's not a diplomatic response. That's practically a challenge. The Velkrin Emperor's reply came within the hour. It was broadcast across all channels so everyone could hear it. The Emperor's laughter echoed through every speaker on every ship and station. He laughed like it was the funniest joke he had ever heard. So the quiet ones finally have something to say? The Emperor's voice boomed. We will demonstrate what happens to species who forget their place in the galaxy. Watch and learn how empires deal with insects. Hyun looked at his crew. They were all young. None of them had ever trained for combat. None of them knew what war really meant, but somewhere on Earth someone apparently did. Someone had sent that response. Someone wasn't afraid. Hyun just wished he knew what they knew. Taeyang had spent his entire life studying human history. As a military analyst and historian, he knew more about ancient battles than most people knew about current events. He had written 12 books about humanity's war-torn past, but he had never expected to actually use that knowledge. The call came at midnight. Report to the Hall of Forgotten Wars immediately. Emergency session. Taeyang lived near Geneva, so it only took him 20 minutes to reach the underground complex. He had been there dozens of times for research, but never like this. The halls were lit up bright and people were rushing everywhere. Chancellor Doyen met him at the entrance. The leader of humanity's civilian government looked tired but focused. Taeyang, thank you for coming. We need your expertise. Of course, Chancellor. What's happening? We're about to open the museums. Taeyang's heart skipped. All of them? Every single one. The Hall of Forgotten Wars was enormous. It stretched deep underground, a massive complex that stored 3,000 years of military history. Weapons, vehicles, ships, armor, everything. Most people thought it was just a museum. They were wrong. In the main conference room, dozens of people were already working. Taeyang recognized General Yunji, one of the few military officers who still trained in what they called historical combat scenarios. She was reviewing data on multiple screens. Soman was there too. She was a technical officer who maintained the museums of remembrance across human space. Her job was to keep all the old military equipment in working condition for educational purposes. At least that's what everyone thought her job was. Taeyang over here, Chancellor Doyen called. I need you to analyze the Velkrin threat and compare it to historical Earth empires. Taeyang pulled up the data about the Velkrin Empire. Their technology, their tactics, their fleet composition. He compared it against thousands of historical examples from human history. Chancellor, this is interesting, Taeyang said after an hour of work. The Velkrin are using intimidation tactics that are almost identical to several historical human empires. The Mongols, the Romans, even the early colonial powers. It's a classic pattern. Make a massive show of force, demand immediate surrender, and hope everyone is too scared to fight back. And their technology? General Yunji asked. Taeyang pulled up the technical specifications. Their weapons are approximately 300 to 400 years behind current human military standards. Somin looked up from her terminal. Current standards being what exactly? The equipment we maintain in the museums, Taeyang said. The ships we preserve. The weapons we keep in working order for educational demonstrations. Everything. Chancellor Doyen leaned back in his chair. Somin, give us the status report. Somin pulled up a galaxy-wide map. It showed every human system, every human colony, every human station. And underneath all of it, hidden in the infrastructure, was something else. Every human system has maintained its military infrastructure, Somin explained. We call them museums, historical sites, educational facilities. But they're fully functional. The orbital shipyards that build replica historical vessels can produce real warships. The defense platforms that serve as monuments to past conflicts have live weapon systems. The soldiers who perform historical reenactments are actually trained military personnel. Taeyang felt something click in his mind. We never disbanded the military after the long silence. We just relabeled it. Correct, General Yunji said. Every human system can activate its defense network within hours. Every museum ship can deploy for combat immediately. Every person who works as a historical curator or reenactor is actually a fully trained soldier, pilot, or officer. Chancellor Doyen stood up and walked to the window overlooking the main hall. Below, hundreds of people were working at a pace Taeyang had never seen before. After the unification wars ended, our ancestors made a choice, the Chancellor said. They decided that peace was precious, but forgetting how to defend that peace was dangerous. So they created a system. Maintain everything. Keep every ship, every weapon, every piece of military infrastructure in perfect working condition. But remove the culture of warfare. Make it history, education, preservation. Make it something we remember but don't use. Until we need to, General Yunji added. Somin pulled up more data. We have active maintenance on 50,000 warships, all classified as museum pieces. 2 million fighter craft. Orbital defense grids around all 847 inhabited worlds. Automated defense networks in all 200 star systems, and every single piece of equipment has been continuously upgraded with new technology. The Velkrin think they're facing a peaceful species that forgot how to fight, Taeyang said, understanding now. But they're actually facing a species that has spent 3,000 years preparing for exactly this moment. Chancellor Doyen smiled. Now you understand. General Yunji, draft our response to the Velkrin. General Yunji worked for 30 minutes. When she finished, she read the response out loud. Then she did something Taeyang had never seen her do before. She laughed. Really laughed. Oh, they are going to be so surprised, she said. The response was sent to both the Velkrin Empire and the Galactic Council. It was simple and direct. Request denied. Please vacate council space within 48 hours. This is your only warning. On Forum Prime, the Galactic Council erupted into chaos when they received the message. The other species couldn't believe what they were reading. The humans weren't even mobilizing their fleet. They weren't evacuating their colonies. They were just warning the Velkrin to leave. Ambassador Yuna stood before the council and explained calmly. Humanity takes the Velkrin threat very seriously. We are prepared to defend ourselves and our allies. With what? The Rothani ambassador shouted. You have no military. You've been at peace for 3,000 years. We've been at peace, Yuna agreed. We have not been unprepared. But before she could explain further, the Velkrin Emperor's response came through. His mocking laughter filled the council chamber. The Quiet Ones dare to threaten us? The Emperor's voice boomed. We will start with your colonies. We will burn your worlds. We will show the entire galaxy what happens to species who forget how to fight. Consider this your demonstration. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, the Velkrin fleet began moving toward human space. In the Hall of Forgotten Wars, Chancellor Doyen gave a single order. Send the activation codes. Across human space, in every system and every world, people received the same message. Museum curators, tour guides, historical reenactors, maintenance workers, they all got the call. The museums were opening. In orbit around New Seoul, Commander Junho received the activation codes on his personal device. He was the captain of the Remembrance of Terra, a ship that was built 2,800 years ago during the late Unification Wars. It was 15 kilometers long, a massive dreadnought that served as a floating museum. 50,000 people worked on the ship, giving tours and maintaining historical exhibits. Junho looked at the codes for a long moment. He had always known this day might come. He had trained for it. But he had honestly believed it would never happen. He activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. Activation codes received. Transition to combat status immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Across the ship, 50,000 people stopped being museum workers and became a military crew. They had always been a military crew. They had just been waiting. On Earth, in the Hall of Forgotten Wars, General Yunji watched the status reports come in. System after system reporting ready, ship after ship activating, defense platform after defense platform going online. Chancellor Doyen stood beside her. General, the Velkrin are sending their first wave toward our border systems. 5,000 ships, General Yunji smiled. Not a cruel smile. Just the smile of someone who knows something others don't. Let them come, she said. It's time the galaxy remembered why we built these museums in the first place. Sora had always loved flying. She had been a fighter pilot for 6 years, performing in air shows and historical demonstrations across the Orion sector. Her squadron flew authentic replicas of ancient human fighters, doing loops and rolls for crowds who cheered and took pictures. It was a good life, fun, safe, and peaceful. Then the activation message came through. All pilots report to Armory immediately. Live munitions authorized. Deployment in 2 hours. Sora stared at her device. Live munitions. She had trained with live weapons, of course. Every pilot did, but she had never actually used them outside of controlled test ranges. The weapons had always been there, stored in the armory, labeled as historical artifacts. But they worked. They had always worked. She joined her squadron in the briefing room. 2,000 pilots stood at attention. Their commander, a woman named Heun, stood at the front looking grim but ready. You all know why we're here, Commander Heun said. The Velkrin Empire has threatened human space. They're sending 5,000 ships toward our border systems. We're going to stop them. One of the younger pilots raised his hand. Commander, I've never been in actual combat. None of us have, Heun replied. But we've trained for this scenario thousands of times. We know what to do. Trust your training. Trust your wingmates. And remember, those Velkrin ships are using technology we retired 400 years ago. We have the advantage. Sora felt her heart pounding as she walked to her fighter. It looked the same as always, sleek and beautiful. But when she opened the weapons panel, everything was different. The training modules were gone. Real missiles sat in the launch tubes. Real energy weapons charged up with a hum she had only heard in simulations. She climbed into the cockpit and ran through the pre-flight checklist. Everything felt the same, but everything was different. This was real now. Across the human border systems, the same scene played out again and again. Pilots, soldiers, gunners, and officers who had thought their jobs were just educational. Demonstrations suddenly found themselves preparing. For actual combat, Yunho worked as a systems engineer on Orbital Platform 7 above his homeworld of New Busan. His job was to maintain the platform's systems and give tours to school, groups who wanted to learn about historical defense technology. The platform was enormous, a 10-kilometer-wide structure bristling with weapons that could theoretically sterilize a continent. Theoretically, because the weapons had never been used. When the activation codes came through, Yunho and his team of 40 engineers went to work. They had practiced this procedure hundreds of times, but never for real. The platform's main reactor, which normally ran at 5% capacity, ramped up to full power. Weapon systems that had been in standby mode for decades came online. Targeting computers synchronized with the other 39 platforms in orbit. Yunho's supervisor, a man named Quan, checked the readiness reports. All systems green. We're fully operational. How long has it been since all 40 platforms were active at the same time? Yunho asked. Never, Quan said. Not since they were built. We test them individually, but never all at once. New Busan now has enough orbital firepower to fight off a fleet of 5,000 ships by itself. And we're just one world, Yunho said quietly. We're just one world, Quan agreed. The Velkrin fleet approached human space with confidence. They had destroyed civilizations before. They knew how this worked. Species that had lived in peace for too long forgot how to fight. They panicked. They made mistakes, and they lost. The Velkrin commander, a veteran of 20 campaigns, reviewed the intelligence on humanity. 3,000 years of peace. No wars, no conflicts. A species that had grown soft and weak. This would be easy. His fleet of 5,000 ships crossed into the border system known as Proxima Tertius. According to their information, it was a minor human colony with limited defenses. They would crush it quickly, then move on to bigger targets. What the Velkrin found instead confused them at first. The system was full of structures. Thousands of them. They looked like navigation beacons and communications relays. Simple civilian infrastructure. The Velkrin sensors detected no military vessels, no obvious defenses. Begin landing operations, the Velkrin commander ordered. Prioritize the main colony on the third planet. That's when the structures started shooting. They weren't navigation beacons. They were automated defense stations. Thousands of them, spread throughout the entire system. Each one had been disguised as civilian infrastructure, maintained as historical markers and educational exhibits. The first salvo destroyed 800 Velkrin ships in 12 seconds. The Velkrin commander screamed orders. Return fire! Identify targets. Where are they? But the defense network was too spread out, too numerous. Every time the Velkrin destroyed one station, 10 more opened fire. The stations used weapons technology the Velkrin had never seen before. Energy weapons that could pierce shields, missiles that could track through dimensional jumps, kinetic rounds that moved at relativistic speeds. Commander Junho watched the battle from the bridge of the Remembrance of Terra. His ship hadn't even entered the system yet. The automated defenses were handling everything. Status report, he ordered. Velkrin fleet at 42% strength and falling, his tactical officer reported. They're trying to retreat, but our defense grid has them boxed in. Estimated time to complete victory, 8 minutes. Junho had studied this exact scenario in the academy. He had wargamed it dozens of times, but seeing it happen for real was different. The Velkrin had walked into a trap that had been set up centuries ago, maintained by people who thought they were just preserving history. 20 minutes after entering the Proxima Tertius system, the Velkrin first wave was destroyed. 3,000 ships eliminated by automated defenses. The remaining 2,000 ships scattered in panic, trying to escape back to Velkrin space. Sora and her squadron intercepted them at the system's edge. All fighters, weapons free, Commander Heian ordered. Let's show them what human pilots can do. Sora had flown thousands of training missions. She knew every maneuver, every tactic, but this was the first time she had ever fired her weapons at a real target. Her first missile hit a Velkrin destroyer dead center. The ship exploded in a ball of fire. Her second and third shots took out 2 fighters that were trying to flee. It was easier than the simulations. The Velkrin ships were slower, their reactions more predictable. Within 30 minutes, the entire first wave was gone. 5,000 Velkrin ships destroyed. Human casualties, 0. On the Velkrin throne world, the Emperor watched the battle recordings in disbelief. 5,000 ships gone. Not defeated in a long battle, just gone. Eliminated in less than an hour by defenses that shouldn't have existed. What are those humans? He shouted at his advisors. Where did those weapons come from? His chief military advisor looked pale. Emperor, our intelligence was wrong. Very wrong. Those museums and historical sites the humans maintain. They're not just museums. They're fully functional military bases. Every single one. How is that possible? They've been at peace for 3,000 years. Yes, Your Majesty, at peace. Not unprepared. The Emperor slammed his fist on his throne. Send everything. Every ship we have. I don't care if they have good defenses. We have numbers. 47,000 ships. They cannot stop us all. The advisor tried to warn him. Your Majesty, perhaps we should reconsider. Send them. The Emperor roared. I will not be humiliated by a species of museum keepers. On Earth, in the Hall of Forgotten Wars, General Yunji received the report about the Velkrins' decision to commit their entire fleet. "They're not retreating," she said to Chancellor Doyen. "They're sending everything they have. Then we need to show them everything we have," the Chancellor replied. "It's time to unmothball the fleet." General Yunji nodded and sent out the order that she had hoped she would never have to give. "All museum ships, prepare for deployment." This is not a drill. "All historical reenactment personnel, transition to active military status. The long silence is over." Across human space in shipyards and orbital docks that had been called museums for 3,000 years, the fleet began to wake up. 50,000 ships ranging from ancient dreadnoughts to modern stealth vessels. Every one of them maintained in perfect condition. Every one of them upgraded continuously with the latest technology. Commander Junho stood on the bridge of the Remembrance of Terra as his crew completed their transition to combat status. The ship that had been giving tours yesterday was now a fully operational warship, the most powerful ship ever built by human hands, and it was just one of 50,000. "All stations report ready," his executive officer announced. Junho took a deep breath. "Then let's go meet our guests. It's time to teach the Velkrin why we kept these museums." Fleet Admiral Hana had waited her entire life for this moment. For 40 years, she had commanded the first historical fleet, a collection of 8,000 ships that formed the core of humanity's museum navy. She had conducted training exercises, performed orbital demonstrations, and given speeches about the importance of remembering history, but deep down, she had always known this day might come. Now it was here. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. Hana looked at the tactical display. 8,000 human ships against 47,000 Velkrin vessels. On paper, the numbers looked impossible, but Hana had studied warfare for her entire career. She knew that numbers weren't everything. "Where's Captain Sungho?" she asked. "Shadow Fleet is in position, Admiral. They've been tracking the Velkrin fleet for the past 6 hours. The Velkrin don't know they're being watched." Captain Sungho commanded the stealth reconnaissance ships, vessels so advanced that even most humans didn't know they existed. His ships could track enemies across entire star systems without being detected. Right now he knew the position of every single Velkrin vessel. "Good," Hana said. "Send the message to Dr. Minji. Tell her it's time to show off her toys." Dr. Minji had spent her career designing weapons, not historical replicas, not training systems, real weapons. Theoretical weapons that humanity had never needed to use but had never stopped developing. For 3,000 years, human scientists had asked themselves, what if we needed to fight again? What would we need? Now the galaxy was about to find out. On her research station in orbit around Mars, Dr. Minji activated systems that had only existed in planning documents and sealed laboratories. She pulled up the list of available weapons and smiled. It was quite a list. Stellar compression bombs, quantum entanglement jammers, reality membrane disruption fields, singularity missiles, and those were just the conventional options. "Let's start with something simple," she muttered to herself. "Don't want to scare them too much." The Velkrin fleet entered human space near the Proxima Secundus system. It was the largest gathering of military force the Velkrin Empire had ever assembled. 47,000 ships, all moving together like a dark wave of metal and energy. The Velkrin Emperor was watching from his throne world, confident that sheer numbers would guarantee victory. The humans might have good defenses, but they couldn't possibly stop this many ships. Fleet Admiral Hana's ships waited for them. The human fleet looked tiny by comparison. 8,000 ships against 47,000. But appearances were deceiving. "Admiral, the Velkrin fleet is entering weapons range," her tactical officer announced. "Hold position," Hana ordered. "Let them get closer." Captain Sungho's stealth ships had already mapped out every Velkrin vessel. They knew which ships were command centers, which ones carried the most troops, which ones had the best weapons. They had been building this intelligence for hours. When the Velkrin fleet was exactly where Hana wanted them, she gave the order, "Fire everything." What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. The human ships opened fire with weapons the Velkrin had never imagined. Energy beams that could cut through a dozen ships at once. Missiles that created chain reactions through entire formations. Kinetic projectiles that moved so fast they appeared as flashes of light. But the real terror came from Dr. Minji's special weapons. The quantum entanglement jammers activated first. Suddenly, 3,000 Velcrin ships found that their faster-than-light drives didn't work anymore. They couldn't escape. They were trapped in normal space, unable to run. Then came the reality membrane disruption fields. These weapons did something that shouldn't be possible. They changed the laws of physics in a small area. Ship shields that normally deflected energy suddenly absorbed it instead, overloading the ships from within. Weapons that should have fired straight ahead curved away uselessly. The singularity missiles were the worst. Each one created a small black hole that lasted exactly 30 minutes. Anything within 10 kilometers was pulled inside and destroyed. The Velcrin had never seen anything like it. Within the first 5 minutes, 7,000 Velcrin ships were destroyed. The Velcrin commander screamed orders, trying to organize a response. But the human fleet wasn't where his sensors said it should be. Captain Sung-ho's stealth technology was masking their real positions, feeding false data to the Velcrin targeting systems. When the Velcrin ships finally managed to fire back, they hit empty space. Meanwhile, the human ships danced through the Velcrin formation like they were performing a ballet. Every move was perfect. Every shot hit its target. This was what 3,000 years of training produced. Soldiers who had studied warfare as an art form, who had simulated every possible scenario, who knew battle tactics from 100 different civilizations. Commander Junho guided the remembrance of Terra through the chaos. His ship was 2,800 years old, but it mounted weapons that were created last year. The combination of ancient durability and modern firepower made it nearly unstoppable. "Target the command carriers," he ordered. "Take out their leadership." The massive dreadnought's main guns fired. Each shot could destroy a moon. Against the Velcrin ships, they were devastating. 3 command carriers exploded in the span of seconds. Sora and her fighter squadron weaved through the battle, taking out Velcrin fighters that tried to counterattack. Her hands moved on the controls like she was playing a musical instrument. Every maneuver was perfect. Every shot hit its mark. "This is easier than the simulations," she said over the squadron channel. "That's because we trained against opponents who knew what they were doing," Commander Heun replied. "The Velcrin are 400 years behind us. They don't stand a chance." After 20 minutes of battle, 20,000 Velcrin ships were destroyed. The survivors began trying to surrender. Fleet Admiral Hana held up her hand. "Ceasefire." Across the human fleet, weapons fell silent. The Velcrin ships that remained, about 27,000 of them, hung in space, waiting. Hana opened a communication channel to the entire Velcrin fleet. "This is Fleet Admiral Hana of the Terran Defense Forces. You entered our space with hostile intent. You threatened our people. You demanded our surrender. This was your answer." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Your Emperor has 1 hour to issue an unconditional surrender. If he refuses, we will demonstrate what our real weapons can do. What you've seen so far was just the basic armory. You don't want to see what we keep in the deep storage." It wasn't a bluff. Dr. Minji had dozens of other weapons she hadn't deployed yet. Things that could ignite stars, collapse dimensions, or rewrite matter at the quantum level. Humanity had spent 3,000 years asking what if, and building the answers. The Velcrin Emperor watched the battle recordings in his throne room. He had gone from confident to confused to terrified in the span of 40 minutes. 20,000 ships gone, just gone, and the humans had barely taken any damage. A few ships showed minor hull damage. That was it. His military advisor stood beside him, pale and shaking. "Your Majesty, they're not just ahead of us technologically. They're in a completely different category. Those weapons, that coordination. They've been preparing for war while appearing peaceful for 3,000 years." The Emperor stared at the screen showing Fleet Admiral Hana's face. She looked calm, confident, not the face of someone who had just won by luck, the face of someone who knew exactly how powerful they were. "How?" the Emperor whispered. "How does a peaceful species become so good at war?" "They didn't become good at war, Your Majesty," the advisor said quietly. "They were always good at war. They just stopped practicing on each other." The Emperor understood then. The humans hadn't forgotten how to fight. They had spent 3,000 years studying fight, improving it, perfecting it, all while maintaining peace among themselves. They had turned warfare into a science and art, a historical discipline that they preserved and advanced without ever using it. Until now. "Send the surrender," the Emperor said, his voice hollow. "Unconditional, total. We cannot fight them." The message went out to all Velcrin forces. Cease all hostile actions and surrender immediately. On Forum Prime, the Galactic Council watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. The other species had prepared themselves for a long, costly war. Instead, they watched humanity win the largest space battle in galactic history in 40 minutes. Ambassador Yuna stood before the council. The Velcrin threat has been neutralized. All species are safe. However, I believe it's time for an honest conversation about galactic security and the nature of peace. The Rathani ambassador, who had mocked humanity's slowness just days ago, could barely speak. You had all this? All along? Yes, Yuna said simply. We did. And now you need to know why. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Every species representative sat in their place, staring at Ambassador Yuna like she was a completely different person than the calm diplomat they had known for years. The battle recordings played on every screen. 40 minutes. 20,000 Velcrin ships destroyed. Human casualties. 0 ships lost, minor damage to 23 vessels. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Finally, the Rathani ambassador spoke. 3,000 years. You had all this for 3,000 years and you never told anyone? We didn't hide it, Ambassador Yuna replied calmly. We called them museums. Historical sites. Educational facilities. Anyone could visit. We gave tours. We explained the history. We just didn't emphasize that everything still worked. That's hiding it, the Pelax representative shouted. You made us think you were weak. We never said we were weak, Yuna corrected. You assumed we were weak because we chose not to fight. There's a difference. Dr. Minho stood beside Yuna and pulled up a presentation. He had been preparing for this moment, knowing that eventually the galaxy would ask these questions. Let me explain humanity's history, Minho began. For 5,000 years before the long silence, humans fought each other constantly. Wars over territory, resources, beliefs, pride. Every reason you can imagine, we fought over it. Millions died. Entire regions were destroyed. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Most species had similar histories. Then we achieved unification, Minho continued. We became one species, one government, one civilization. And we made a choice, never again. No more human killing human. We achieved perfect peace among ourselves. But we learned something important, Yuna added. Peace without strength is just waiting to be conquered. So we created a system. We would maintain all our military capability, every ship, every weapon, every soldier. But we would remove the culture of warfare. We would preserve it as history, as memory, as education. We would remember war without living it. Captain Hyun stood up from his seat. He had been invited to address the council as a representative of the common human perspective. I'm a ship captain. I've served for 20 years. I never thought I would fight in a real battle. But I always knew I could if I needed to. Every human knows this. We all serve in what we call the historical services. We all train. We all maintain the equipment. We all remember. Chancellor Doyen appeared on screen from Earth. The galaxy deserves to know the full scope of what we maintain. Someone please share the data. Someone pulled up the complete inventory. The council members gasped as the numbers appeared. 50,000 active warships, 2 million fighter craft, orbital defense grids around 847 inhabited worlds, automated defense networks in 200 star systems, 400 million trained personnel, and technology that was 500 to 800 years ahead of current galactic standards. How? The Kelvex representative asked. How did you develop such advanced technology while at peace? Dr. Minji appeared via hologram from her research station. Because we never stopped asking what if. Or what if someone attacks us? What if we need to defend ourselves? What if peace ends? We spent 3,000 years answering those questions. Every scientist, every engineer, every researcher contributed. We called it theoretical research. Historical preservation, but it was always functional. Taeyang stepped forward carrying a data pad. I'm a historian. I've studied every war humanity ever fought. Every mistake we made. Every tactic that worked. Every technology that gave us an advantage. We preserved all of it. We studied it. We improved it. The Velcrin used tactics that were common 3,000 years ago. We knew exactly how to counter them because we've been studying those tactics for millennia. The Velcrin Emperor was brought into the council chamber as a prisoner. He looked small and defeated, nothing like the arrogant conqueror from days before. The council members stared at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Ambassador Yuna addressed him directly. Emperor, you asked your advisors a question. How does a peaceful species become so good at war? Do you understand the answer now? The Emperor nodded slowly. You never stopped being warriors. You just stopped fighting each other. Exactly, Yuna said. We channeled all our warrior instincts into preservation, study, and preparation. We became better at war by not practicing it on each other. General, Unji appeared on the screen from the Hall of Forgotten Wars. Her stern face showed the closest thing to a smile most people had ever seen from her. For 3,000 years, every general, every admiral, every soldier has known this day might come, Unji said. We've war-gamed every scenario, built contingencies for threats that didn't exist yet, maintained equipment we prayed we'd never use. When you finally showed up, threatening us with weapons we'd retired centuries ago, what else could we do but laugh? The council chamber filled with murmurs. The other species were starting to understand. Gina, the young communications officer, stood up from her seat. May I say something? Ambassador Yuna nodded. I'm 23 years old, Gina said. I grew up thinking I was a communications specialist for a diplomatic ship. I never thought I'd be part of a military operation, but when the call came, I knew exactly what to do. Because even though we call it history and education, we all train for this. Every human does. It's part of our culture now. Remember the wars. Honor the peace. Stay ready. Dr. Minho pulled up another presentation. We've studied 73 different species across the galaxy. Every single one that achieved long-term peace without maintaining defensive capability eventually fell when threatened. But species that maintain strength while building peaceful cultures survive for millennia. It's a pattern we saw in our own history, and we see it across the galaxy. Chancellor Doyen addressed the council directly. Humanity would like to propose a new initiative. We will share our defensive technologies with all council species. But there's a condition. Every species must create their own museums of remembrance. Maintain your military capability, train your people, but build cultures that choose peace first. You want us to become like you? The Rathani ambassador asked. We want you to be safe, Yuna replied. The Velkrin weren't the first empire to try this, and they won't be the last. The galaxy needs to be able to defend itself without losing its commitment to peace. The Pelex representative leaned forward. And if we refuse? Then you refuse, Yuna said with a shrug. We're not going to force you, but we won't always be here to protect you either. We proved we can defend ourselves. You need to prove you can defend yourselves too. Over the next hours, the council debated. Some species were hesitant. Others were eager to learn. But eventually they reached an agreement. Humanity would help establish defensive protocols across the galaxy, sharing technology and training methods. Every species would maintain their capability to defend themselves while committing to peaceful resolution of conflicts. The Velkrin Emperor stood to address the council one final time. I have a question for Ambassador Yuna. Speak, Yuna said. Why did you laugh? When we threatened you, when we promised to destroy your worlds, your response was to laugh. Why? General Yunji answered before Yuna could. Because you thought you were threatening a species that had forgotten how to fight. You thought 3,000 years of peace made us soft. You didn't realize that we spent those 3,000 years becoming the best warriors the galaxy had ever seen. We just never had anyone to fight. Until you showed up, Fleet Admiral Hana added via hologram, and gave us a reason to open the museums. 6 months later, Taeyang gave the Velkrin Emperor a tour of the Hall of Forgotten Wars. It was part of the peace agreement. The Emperor needed to understand what he had challenged. They walked through room after room, weapons from every era of human history, battle plans from conflicts spanning 5,000 years, holocrons showing millions of soldiers training in combat techniques. It went on for kilometers underground. At the end of the tour, they reached the exit. A simple plaque hung on the wall. The Emperor read it aloud. We keep these halls not to glorify war, but to remember its cost. We maintain these weapons not to seek conflict, but to defend peace. We train these soldiers not to conquer others, but to ensure no one can conquer us. This is our burden, our responsibility, and our gift to the future. The strength to protect peace and the wisdom never to break it. The Emperor turned to Taeyang. And if someone threatens that peace again? Taeyang smiled. Then the museums open their doors and the galaxy remembers why humanity earned 3,000 years of quiet. Back on the Evening Star, Captain Hyun conducted his normal duties again. The ship had returned to diplomatic service. The war was over. The museums had closed their doors and returned to giving tours. Gina worked at her communication station, processing routine messages. "Captain, I got a request from a school group. They want to tour the orbital defense platforms around New Busan." "Approved," Hyun said. "Make sure they understand the history." "The history and the present," Gina added with a small smile. Commander Junho gave tours on the remembrance of Terra again. But now when he explained the ship's capabilities, people listened more carefully. The Battle of Proxima Secundus was already part of the ship's historical collection, taught alongside the ancient conflicts of Earth.